Father, please give us ears to hear, eyes to see, and hearts that are willing to understand your word. May we not understand it according to our own understanding, Lord, but help us understand it as you would have it be understood. And let us not merely be puffed up with knowledge, God, but instead let us be transformed from the inside out so that our hearts will look a little bit more like yours, so that we will understand your ways a little bit better, and so that by the end of tonight we'll be better equipped to live as you would have us live and love as you would have us love. We love you, Lord, and you are worthy to be praised. Guide us as we go into your word. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
We are going into the book of Daniel starting today.
I'm so excited.
I'm actually excited. This is my first time getting to lead in a while.
That's true.
Because
like almost a year.
Well, I don't know if it's been a year.
Yeah.
But it's been a few months for sure.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
He's like, it's been a few years. It's just a few months.
Yeah.
It's felt like a year.
Yeah. It's been a while. Basically, long story short, we've been going through the Old Testament for several years now.
Yeah.
I wish that we'd started in Genesis, but we didn't. For some reason, we started in the book of Judges. And we went through Judges, and we've gone through 1st and 2nd Samuel, we've gone through 1st and 2nd Kings. We took some breaks along the way and did some stuff in the New Testament. But then as we went through 2nd Kings, we stopped and we were doing little like overviews of the prophets. And we've covered most of the prophets at this point. The only ones that we have not covered are Ezekiel, and then Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, and then Daniel. And so Daniel is I was kind of just trying to pick one that we could do a little bit more in depth, because all the other ones have been overviews. And Daniel, since it's got a lot of narrative, I thought it'd be worth going in depth. First off, because it's a very weird book, as we're going to talk about. But then also, it follows along the same story, right? So the book of Judges tells us what it was like before Israel had a king. And then 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings tells us what the actual kingdom looked like. And then Daniel, it gives us a glimpse of what life was like during the exile. Whereas you really don't have any other books like that. I mean, Esther is kind of like that. But Esther is set a little bit after the exile, to where it's a lot of people already returned to the land, and she just was amongst the Jews who chose to still live away from the land. And so I figured Daniel would be worth going into just so we're tracking along with the story. And then I'm gonna give it back to Sean. He's gonna help us do an overview of Ezekiel, and then we're probably going to go into Ezra and Nehemiah. And we probably won't go as in depth in those books as we're gonna go into Daniel, but that's kind of the big picture there. That being said, it's only 21 verses, and we could easily make those 21 verses last 7 hours if we wanted to. But I thought that it might be worthwhile at the beginning here to do a little overview of the book, just because to me, it's good to go in depth, but it doesn't do any good to go in depth if you forget the big picture. And I think that it's important in Bible study to do both of those, because I know a lot of people who they can go really in depth into stuff, which is good. But a lot of the times, if you lose sight of the big picture, it'll actually lead you into misunderstanding what the book is actually saying. Because I don't know, if somebody wrote you a 5-page letter and you just hyper fixated on one sentence in that letter, you might end up really misinterpreting what they're trying to say to you, because that one sentence might the context around it changes things. And so we're gonna do a big overview thing. I don't know how long it's gonna take, but I do want to spend most of our time going through Daniel chapter 1. But I created a little PowerPoint to help us through this, because it's kind of, changed things up a little bit, and I had some time at work today to where I can do this. And because, I don't know, it's easier for me to visualize a little bit. So, let's start with a big outline here. And one reason I wanted to do this visually is because, to me, the book of Daniel is one of the weirdest books when it comes to just an outline and the structure of the book, to where I'm kind of just going to throw this out there so that y'all can kind of join me and try to figure out how this book is structured, because there's some very weird things about it. But you wouldn't notice that right off the bat, because right off, if you just look at it, it actually looks like it has a very straightforward structure. There's 12 chapters. The first 6 are stories, and the last 6 are prophecies, which seems pretty straightforward, right? Okay, 6 chapters of one, 6 chapters of the other. That seems pretty straightforward, right? And if you go through it, the stories, if you're looking at it, There seems to be like a general theme to them, right? So there's like 3 different tests that Daniel and his friends have to go through. We're going to talk about one of them today. So like the test that we're going to talk about today is like there's this dietary issue that they're wrestling through. And then when you get to chapter 3, that's the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story, where they are tested because there's a statue that everybody's supposed to bow down before. They get thrown into the furnace. And then you go to chapter 6, and then Daniel is being tested in regards to prayer, where they're not supposed to be praying to anybody except the king, but he wants to pray to God, and so he gets thrown into the lion's den. And then in the midst of that, you also have dreams being interpreted. There's one in chapter 2 and one in chapter 4, and then in chapter 5, yeah. Hey, Joseph.
Hey.
Just me.
Okay, cool. And then in chapter 5, there's also there's another weird story in there about the whole writing on the wall, famous story. And then you get to the back half of the book, and there's 4 main visions, right? There's chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, and then chapters 10 through 12 are another big vision. And so like I said, if you just look at that, it looks like a pretty straightforward outline. Mm-hmm. But where things get complicated is the fact that, or let me ask you all something real quick. Trivia question. What language was the Old Testament written in?
Gosh. I'm
Let's
gonna
see
feel
if we break this down.
so bad.
So who are the main people we're dealing with in the Old Testament? Like, what's the main people group? The Israelites. What language do Israelites speak?
Hebrew?
Hebrew, right?
Okay.
So the Old Testament is written primarily in Hebrew.
Okay.
There are 2 exceptions to that. One of them is a small portion in the book of Esther, I believe. I think it's Esther.
Probably.
But then the biggest exception to that is the book of Daniel, to where Daniel is actually written in 2 separate languages. Part of it is written in Hebrew, but then another part of it is written in Aramaic. But this is where it gets weird. Chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, like the first half of verse 4 is Hebrew. And then the second half of verse 4 through the end of chapter 7 is Aramaic. And then it goes back to Hebrew again for the final 5 chapters. Which, if you're just like, I tried to make this to where it lines up with the stuff above it, to where you can tell it doesn't line up as smoothly as you would want.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of like, you want like 6 chapters to be in Aramaic and 6 chapters to be in Hebrew, and it almost works out that way. Like if you took the chapter 1 in Hebrew and you put it at the end, then it would work. But that's not what it is. And to me, this is something that frustrates me to no end. Because it tells me that Daniel is doing something interesting here, and we've got to figure out what it is. And I'm going to give you like my theory here, and it's not like just my theory. I think that like other people hold this as well. I'm not like starting a cult or something. But to me, I just think this is why the visual is helpful, because it lets you know that something interesting is going on here. But then it gets even weirder, because whenever you continue to look at it more, it's written in different, like third person, first person, right? So chapters 1 through the beginning of chapter 7 are all third person, right? Like he, she, it. But by the time you get to chapters 7 and onwards, it's all first person, where Daniel's like, so chapters 1 through 7, whenever Daniel refers, or I guess primarily chapters 1 through 6, and in the beginning of chapter 7, whenever Daniel is referring to himself, he simply says, Daniel, right? Daniel went and did this, Daniel went and did that. But whenever you get to the final few chapters, it is no longer Daniel, it is I went and did this. Which is interesting to me. And to me, this tells me, like if you're just looking at that visually, something's going on in chapter 7 that we need to pay attention to. Right? Because there's something weird going on there that I think will be the key to understanding it, which actually is really beneficial to us as Christians, because I don't think we should be surprised that one of the most popular verses cited in the New Testament comes from Daniel chapter 7. And so, real quick, what I wanted to do is I just wanted to read the verse that I think will ultimately prove to be kind of the key verse in the entire book of Daniel. And then I'll kind of give you like my theory behind why this is written the way it is. So Daniel chapter 7 is basically a vision, right? And this vision is going to tie into another vision we're going to talk about next week in chapter 2, where Nebuchadnezzar has this dream and there's going to be this statue with these 4 pieces of metal, right? And they represent kingdoms. Chapter 7 is going to be a very similar vision where Daniel is going to see 4 beasts. and those are going to represent the same kingdoms from chapter 2. And the kingdoms, I mean, it literally explains it in the book, but they represent like subsequent kingdoms of the earth, right? So where it's going to be like it's like the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, stuff like that. But then at towards the end of chapter 7, as Daniel is looking at all this stuff going on, where he has this vision of the 4 beasts, in verse 13, it says this: I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and came near before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every tongue might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not be taken away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So, in the middle of all these other visions, Daniel sees God sitting on the throne, right? And God is the Ancient of Days. And then he sees somebody who he describes as being like a son of man. So he looks like a human, but he's riding on the clouds. And if you've read the rest of the Old Testament, you know that God is the one who rides on the clouds, right? To where whenever you like see like the Israelites leaving Egypt, the clouds going before them, and it's God, right? And then you have God sitting like a cloud on Mount Sinai, and God sitting like a cloud into the tabernacle. But in this vision, Daniel sees somebody like a son of man, so he looks human, but he's doing what only God can do. But then that human who's doing what only God can do approaches God. And it says that God gave him dominion, glory, a kingdom, and all the peoples, nations, and men of every tongue might serve him. And so you've got this person doing what only God can do, and he's approaching God, and God gives him eternal glory, honor, dominion, an everlasting kingdom. Which is also weird because other passages in Scripture say that God gives his glory to nobody else. So it's like a person doing what only God can do approaches God and receives from God that which only God can have. And then Daniel just moves on, right? But over the next few centuries, you have Jewish people who are trying to figure out who is this Son of Man. Jesus shows up, and his favorite title for himself is Son of Man. When you read the Gospels, it's like over 80 times. He's like, I'm the Son of Man, I'm the Son of Man. And then the thing that ultimately will get Jesus killed is that one day, like, you know, whenever he's betrayed and he's taken before the high priests, he stands before them, and they're asking him, are you the Messiah? Are you such and such? All this stuff. And he's not saying anything. So finally the high priest says, I adjure you in the name of the living God, tell me, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed? So he says, are you the Messiah, right? Are you the King? And Jesus responds and says, you have said it, but truly I say to you, you will see the Son of Man riding on the clouds of heaven. So Jesus says, not only am I the Messiah, he says, I'm going to do you one better. I'm the Son of Man who's going to ride on the clouds of heaven. Which is also a big dig at the high priest, because the high priest is judging him, but according to Daniel, the Son of Man is the one who's going to judge everything. And so Jesus basically says, not only am I the Messiah, but I'm God in the flesh, and one day I'm going to be judging you. And so that's what it says. The high priest ripped his garments and said, this man's committed blasphemy. Do we need anything else? And he hands him over to death. So this is significant because Jesus apparently views chapter 7 as being very important. And if you're looking at how the book is structured, it seems like chapter 7 is the seam, like if this were like a garment. It's the seam which connects the book, right? Because as we're going to see, today's chapter seems like it's mainly an introduction. So it makes sense that the book is in Hebrew because you're following the Hebrew people as they go off into exile, right? So it's in Hebrew. But then whenever you look at chapters 2 through 7, all of a sudden there's a shift. Yes, you're following Jewish people, right? You're following Daniel and his friends as they're in Babylon. But the shift is no longer just on the Jewish people. It's specifically on how their faithfulness to God is impacting the nations around them, right? Yeah.
And you might have mentioned this earlier, but I must have missed it since I came in a little late. But when we're talking about Aramaic, right, I'm assuming that's like the language of the nobles and the elites, correct?
So Aramaic was, it was like the language that they would have spoken over in Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Technically it's the language of the Arameans, right? So if you think like the basically modern day Syria.
Yeah.
So the Arameans were just north of Israel. But yeah, so this was a language that basically the Jewish people adopted this after their time in Babylon.
Okay.
So this is like a little fun fact about Hebrew. If you ever looked it up, the original alphabet for Hebrew does not look how our current alphabet in Hebrew looks. And that's because after their time in Babylon, whenever they came back, Hebrew and Aramaic are very similar languages, right? It's basically like the relationship between like Italian and French, to where they're different languages, but like they're closely related. You know, that's why people always say study Latin, because Latin just like, teaches you all of it.
Yeah.
But so Hebrew and Aramaic, they're closely related, but the current version of Hebrew is using the Aramaic alphabet. And so if you ever read like the Hebrew Bible nowadays, it is written like it's Hebrew, but it's written in the Aramaic script, which is just like fun, and it all dates back to their time in Babylon. And so you do see that transition happening during this time. But chapters 2 through 7 are primarily focused on how Daniel and his friends' faithfulness is impacting the people in Babylon, right? And so it makes sense that the language shifts to be more about, it's the language of the people in Babylon. But then, after that thing in chapter 7, where it's like, all of a sudden you have the Son of Man receiving eternal glory, honor, dominion over everything, chapters 8 through 12 turn the attention back to the fate of Israel. Right? So once you know what the fate of all the nations is, it says, okay, well now let's talk about Israel in particular. Because ultimately this book is written to the Jewish people to comfort them in their exile. And so they want to know what's going to happen to our nation. Right? And so I think it makes sense why it changes back to Hebrew. Right? But so that's the big outline. But then whenever you actually look deeper into the book, you actually see that the structure is kind of reinforced. I'm going to go through this a bit quicker. I wanted to put this on here real quick. This is just a timeline, so you know roughly where we're at. So I got it kind of color-coded. Jeremiah is in green, Ezekiel is in pink, Daniel's in blue, because these are the books that we just went through Jeremiah. We're going to go through Ezekiel next. I just find this helpful because I'm wanting to highlight the fact that these guys all ministered at roughly the same time. So you can see that there was actually I guess 7 years of overlap where all three of them were ministering at the same time, but in different locations. To where Jeremiah never went to Babylon. Jeremiah stayed in Jerusalem, and he died. I think he died in Egypt, actually. Whereas Daniel and Ezekiel both went off to Babylon, but Daniel went first. So you'll look. There's 3 different deportations that the Bible recounts, to where it wasn't just like one sweep where like everybody was destroyed. Basically, first the elites and the nobles were taken, and Daniel was amongst that group. So he was taken to Babylon in 605 BC. And Jeremiah mentions that, and so that's something that we kind of talked about when we were going through Jeremiah. And then a little while later, the craftsmen and leaders were taken. It seems like that's kind of when Ezekiel went over to Babylon. And then eventually Jerusalem was destroyed. And that's when Jeremiah's ministry came to an end. And then Ezekiel ministers for a little bit. But you'll notice in particular that Daniel's ministry lasts a really long time. And that's going to be the emphasis of today's chapter. Because today's chapter is bookended by saying, this is when Daniel's ministry began, and he ministered till here. And he's specifically, basically the chapter is emphasizing that Daniel was there the entire exile. And so Daniel, in many ways, is supposed to be like the embodiment of, or like the representative of what the exile was like for the Jewish people. Right? Like, he's an example of like a faithful Jew living in exile. And so I just wanted to highlight that. The various numbers there, those are just like references to like how we know when those like chapters were written, because it'll say, oh, this was during the first year of so-and-so, and so that's just what those are. All right. Other few things. So this is just like breaking down the book itself, just showing you like the structure behind it. So I've got it broken into 3 sections, right? Hebrew, Aramaic, and Hebrew. And we've talked about this in the past in this group. One thing that differs from our modern version of storytelling versus like ancient storytelling, especially in like the ancient Near East, like where Israel is and stuff, is that whenever we currently tell stories, like I don't know if you've ever like taught this to like students and stuff, you have like the rising conflict, and then it builds up to like a climax, and then there's like a solution at the end, and usually the climax of the story comes like near the end, right? Like if I'm reading Harry Potter, like the climax of the story is not going to happen in the middle of the book; it's going to happen in like the last chapter or the second to last chapter. Whereas in ancient like Israelite storytelling and a lot of storytelling over there, they would do it a little bit differently. To where this is what you would call like a chiasm. Sometimes we do this for like poems, to where it's like that A, B, C, D, C, B, A structure, to where the beginning and the end parallel one another, and then they work their way to the climax in the middle of the story. And some people like read too much into this to where like they want to turn the entire Bible into a chiasm, to where like every single passage has a chiasm. But I think in the case of Daniel here, it actually isn't a stretch to suggest that these are like there's like a chiastic structure to this. And so the first Hebrew section, you'll see that the chapter begins and ends with a mention of like the beginning of the exile, the end of the exile. And then it emphasizes Daniel and his 3 friends, right, at the beginning and the end. And then you have Daniel, who's resisting defilement. You're going to understand what all this stuff is in chapter 1 when we go through it. And then you have the official who's resisting death. And at the very center of that, it tells us that God granted Daniel loving kindness and compassion before the commander of the officials. And so the central theme of this chapter would be how God allowed Daniel to be elevated in the eyes of his, like, the people who you would expect to be pagan oppressors. And that kind of, like, the reason why this is an introduction is because that sets the theme for what's going to happen throughout the rest of the book, right? Because Daniel, I mean, even though he's in exile, he's going to end up being elevated to where he's like third in command of the entire place, right? And so you see God elevating him even in the midst of this.
Almost like Joseph or something.
We're going to talk about Joseph a lot today. Buckle up. And then the second section, which is the Aramaic section, you'll see that it begins and ends with a dream of the 4 kingdoms, right? We talked about this earlier, right? There's the 4 metals and the 4 beasts, right? And then you have miraculous deliverance, right? You've got the fiery furnace, and then at the end you've got Daniel in the lion's den, right? 2 different stories where the Jewish faithfulness to God lands them in a place where they should have died, but God miraculously delivers them. And then after that, and before that, you've got 2 proud kings, right? On one hand, you've got Nebuchadnezzar, who is very proud, but God humbles him and ultimately restores him. And then you've got Belshazzar, who God attempts to humble, but he will not be humbled, and therefore he's destroyed, right? That's the writing on the wall story. And then in the midst of all that, at the very center of the story, Daniel chapter 4, verse 37, you have Nebuchadnezzar. Keep in mind, he is the king of Babylon. And he says, I praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven. For all his works are true, and his ways are just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride. So that's really cool. Because here you have a Gentile king who is praising God of Israel. And if this whole section is emphasizing the fate of the nations, that's really encouraging to us, because we're not Jewish, right? And so it tells us that God does seem to have some sort of plan for Gentiles. And so Nebuchadnezzar, he's a Gentile king who, I mean, he's not even just a Gentile king. He is the king who destroyed Jerusalem. Yet now he is praising the God of Jerusalem. So like that's like, whoa, like that's you can see how that'd be like a climactic moment. And then that leads us to the last section. This section is going to be very fun to go through. We're going to be very careful because this is where people get weird and like conspiracy theory-ish. And like you'll have a lot of like, old grandpas with like, they're like, I've figured out the end times! And like they're going to be like, I know exactly what's going to happen! And this is where we're going to be very careful and thoughtful. Like we might even, like, I'm not even going to guarantee we go through an entire chapter on these weeks. We might go through less just to make sure we're being careful with it. But this is where you have a lot more prophecies. And you can follow it down to the center. And what's really cool about this one is that the C section of this all revolves around this famous passage about the 70 weeks of Daniel, the 77s, which a lot of people love to go crazy about because that's where they're like, oh, like they like doing math and they're like, oh, it's going to be this many years till the Messiah shows up, and then 7 years of tribulation. Like it gets weird. We'll talk about that when we get there. But at the very center of it, Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, then after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war, desolations are decreed. So there's this prophecy about the Messiah being cut off, which would seem to be, the most straightforward reading is the Messiah being killed, which goes against everything that, the Jewish people typically believed when they talk about Messiah. But as Christians, we're like, oh, that seems relevant, right? And so I just want to highlight that there is that structure to all of this. I don't think there's really anything to go to beyond that. I guess just another thing worth mentioning, just as a means of introduction to the story. One thing we're going to keep in mind, it's not going to be relevant today. It's not going to come into relevance till really, later on in the book. But one thing that sets Daniel apart from all the other prophets, other than Revelation, I guess, is that all the prophecies we've looked at so far have been contingent on what man does, right? So Jeremiah goes to the people and says, hey, if you repent, God's going to do this. If you don't repent, God's going to do this. And it hasn't been this matter-of-fact, etched in stone prophecy. Whereas with Daniel, his prophecy is not contingent on the acts of man. It's very much, hey, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be these kingdoms, there's going to be these wars, and this is how it's all going to go down. Which inherently makes it more interesting to study. But it also, that's why it lends its way more towards the conspiracy theory people. because it gives them more to work with. Where they're like, ooh, like it tempts you to view it like a puzzle to be solved, which it kind of is that, but that just means we have to be careful with it. And so there's my long-winded introduction to the book. I figured it was worth just talking about it, just so that we kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And then it might be worth revisiting as we go through the book, just to remember where we're heading. So long story short, I say all that to point out that today's chapter is just an introduction to the book. And we might also, at the end, cover the first 4 verses of chapter 2, just because those are also in Hebrew. Like, I think we're going to kind of double dip. We'll cover some of them today, and then we'll cover them again next week. But that being said, it's a short chapter. So, Sean, can I just have you read through the entire thing?
Hmm?
Here you go.
Nice. If I could read. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vassals of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Then the king said for Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal seed and of the nobles, youths in whom was no defect, who were good in appearance, showing insight in every branch of wisdom, being thoroughly knowledgeable and discerning knowledge, and who had ability to stand in the king's palace. And he sent for him to teach them the literature and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily ration from the king's choice food, and from the wine which he drank, and appointed that they should be educated 3 years, at the end of which they were to stand before the king. Now among them from the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials set names for them, and for Daniel he set the name Belteshazzar, for Hananiah, Shadrach, for Mishael, Meshach, and for Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel set in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food, or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. Now God granted Daniel loving kindness and compassion before the commander of the officials. And the commander of the officials said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths, who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days, and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed before you, and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter, and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that their appearance was better, and that they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food, and the wine they were to drink, and kept giving them vegetables. And as for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and insight in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. Then at the end of the days, which the king had spoken of for bringing them in, the commander of the officials brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king talked with them, and out of them all not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they stood in service before the king. And as for every matter of wisdom and understanding in which the king sought from them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in all his kingdom. And Daniel continued until the 1st year of Cyrus the king.
Which,
Maybe through here too.
You can just stop there. We'll.
One important thing to note is Cyrus, king of Persia, lets the Jews come back and rebuild the temple.
Yes, eventually he does.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cool thing about this is it's such a short chapter, we get to go in depth. So I'm pumped. We're gonna be breaking down words. We're gonna be like looking at all sorts of stuff. It's been a while since we've gotten to do this.
Yeah.
Because we've been so busy like going through like 6 or 7 chapters. You'll notice that I gave Sean that job because I don't have enough self-control to do that. I'm excited to go in depth. But before we go in depth, what is the big picture of what happens here?
So essentially,
Basically, Daniel. So everyone is required to learn their language, their customs, and that includes diet. And basically, Daniel convinces them to let them not eat that food. So they just eat vegetables. And then it turns out they actually look even better. Like they actually add on weight. So basically, they get elevated.
Yeah.
Or Daniel gets elevated specifically. But.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, guess we can wrap up and go home. Yeah. So that's the big picture, right? So you've got this thing where they arrive in exile, right? This is the first wave of people, and ultimately they're being like, well, we'll talk about why they do this and stuff, but they're kind of having them conform to the ways of like basically they're wanting to be servants in the royal household.
Yeah.
But Daniel draws the line. He says, "No, we're not going to do this." Well, he doesn't say that. He says, "Can we not do this?" And they begin to talk about it, and then they said, "Okay, we'll do a trial run." And for 10 days, Daniel and his friends are allowed to do things a little bit differently. It works out, and so they are permitted to keep doing that. And then they ultimately are elevated to a higher status by the end. And so that's the big picture. Now, let's go back and let's break this bad boy down. So, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. All right. So, what's going on there?
So Jehoiakim, he's the second to last king, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes, because Zedekiah is the last one.
wasn't he? Correct me if I'm wrong, and you can probably see it back near the end of 2 Kings. So wasn't he the king who was renamed?
He was the 3rd to last king.
Okay,
So Jehoiakim, then Jehoiakim.
okay.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's always easy to get this mixed up because so Jehoiakim, then Jehoiakim was also Jeconiah, right? That's the same person.
Yeah.
And then there's Zedekiah at the very end. But yes, so this is the 3rd to last king. What were you saying?
I was saying, probably can look back in 2 Kings here and see if that is the case. But I remember wasn't one of the kings
Yeah, that's
renamed
Zedekiah.
Zedekiah?
Which I guess he would be Jehoiakim.
No. He had a different name altogether. I can
That's
go
right.
look it up.
I'm trying to find it.
I think 2 of them might have been. 2 of them actually may have been renamed.
It's Jehoiakim's uncle, Mattaniah.
It was Mattaniah,
Was
whose name was
changed
changed
to
to
Zedekiah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what.
But this is Jehoiakim,
Okay.
right? So main thing you need to know about Jehoiakim, I'll just read it from chapter 24 of 2 Kings. Actually, end of chapter 3. Then Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim the son of Josiah king in the place of Josiah's father and changed his name to Jehoiakim. Right? So this is Jehoiakim, who is the son of Josiah. And his name is changed to Jehoiakim. But he took Jehoahaz and brought him to Egypt, and he died there. So Jehoiakim gave silver and gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land in order to give the money and the command to Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and gold from from the people of the land, each according to his valuation, to give it to Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zebediah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah, and he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh according to all that his fathers had done. So, that's Jehoiakim. He reigns for 11 years, but when it says the 3rd year here, I think that it might be referencing something different than simply... Well, let me explain. Chapter 24, verse 1. In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. So, I'm assuming that the 3rd year here is referring to the 3rd year in which he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. Which it might have corresponded to the 3rd year of his reign altogether, if Nebuchadnezzar came and did that at the very beginning. But what we know, this is around 605 BC, long story short. So this is about 20 years before Jerusalem itself actually falls. And so this is the first deportation. So, 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, besieged it. But this siege is not the one that ends up with Jerusalem being totally destroyed. This is when the nobles are taken captive, as we're going to read. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Alright? I think there's several things probably worth addressing there. What do y'all think?
It's not usually a good sign when it says that God gave the king of Judah into the hand of
Yeah.
a foreign
And
king.
then he also allowed some of his like vessels and treasures to be put into the house of the foreign god.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that significant, you think?
I think it show in a sense it shows God's presence departing.
Okay.
That's how I see it personally.
Okay.
Again, I believe there could be a couple different interpretations here.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the land of Shinar, that's associated with Nimrod, which is associated with Babylon, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, I guess there's not much more that I have to say than that, but I think in Genesis, whatever chapter it is, you have the son of, who is it? Would that be the son of Noah? I mean, the son of Ham. One of the sons of Ham was Nimrod.
Mm-hmm.
He was the mighty hunter before the Lord, and he settled in the land of Shinar. And I don't think you really get mention of it before or much after that at all. But typically Nimrod's associated with building the Tower of Babel, I think, and also with Babylon in general.
Yeah. So the thing that's more relevant to this is whenever you hear Shinar, you're supposed to think the Tower of Babel, right? Because basically Genesis 11, it had happened as they journeyed east. They found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there, and that's whenever they built the Tower of Babel, which is the Tower of Babylon. It continues to drive me nuts that for some reason we translate. I don't get why we translate it differently. It's the same word, and it bothers me so much. Like, I don't get why we do it. It's the Tower of Babylon. Like, you just gotta pick one, right? Either call this Babel or call that Babylon. I don't care. Just do it consistently.
Yeah.
Because most people miss that connection. Like, the Tower, like, whenever you think, like, Babylon, you're supposed to think Babel. And therefore, you're supposed to think human pride, human ambition, rebelling against God, like, and confusion, right? Which, to me, I think this is significant. Because the Tower of Babel story is explaining how, like, I mean, that's the origin story of not only the nations, but also for Israel, right? Because it's because God scatters the nations that he now has to pick a nation through whom he's going to, like, produce a Messiah to bring everybody back together. And so Genesis 11's Tower of Babel, Genesis 12, he's like, hey, Abraham, I'm going to make a nation out of you, right? And so, like, the Tower of Babel story is a very significant story because that's where everybody was scattered. And now there's, like, this irony because now the chosen people of God are being brought to the place where it all started, right? So it's like there's like this, like it's kind of cool, like there. And then ironically, this is the one book where, like, it's written in two different languages, which is like, oh, that's funny. Like, it's like,
And I guess from, like, the greater narrative we've been talking about of, like, the undoing of Israel, it kind of makes sense to, like, I guess from, like, a narrative standpoint, that they would be brought really back to, like, the place where essentially they were birthed from.
yes, yeah, it's like, especially because you think about it, Abraham. This is the area where he lived whenever God called him out.
That's true.
Right?
That's
Abraham lived in the area which would be Babylon, and God said, go to Canaan. But now it's a reversal where he's taking the people of Canaan and bringing them back to Babylon. Because they are now the ones who have swollen human pride and ambition, and they're the ones who are being confused and scattered. Right? So it's literally this reversal, but it's even more heartbreaking because now we're supposed to ask, well, how is God going to, like, work through this? Like, they were the chosen people. Like, it's like in Star Wars, it's like, Anakin, you were the chosen one. You're supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. Like that's exactly what Israel is now. It's like, y'all were supposed to be the light of the nations, but you were so dark that God had to cast you out. And so there's, like, all of that. And then you add to it the fact that, yes, it's God who gave Jehoiakim, who is a descendant of David, right? He gave a descendant of David into the hand of a pagan king, and then he allowed that same pagan king to take vessels out of the temple of God and place them into the temple of his own God. Which, why do you think Nebuchadnezzar would even want to do that? Like, what message is he sending by placing these vessels in his God's temple?
His God is stronger.
Yeah, he's saying, my God is more powerful than yours.
Yeah.
Right? Like, whenever you plunder, like, it's a spoil of war, right? And so whenever you plunder a temple and you take those and put it in the other god's temple, that you're basically giving that your God credit for victory, right? This is his plunder, right? So now it's like the god of Babylon has plundered the temple of Yahweh and taken the spoils for himself. What story does that make you think of?
The very first thing that popped in my head was 1 Samuel with the ark.
Explain that. Just 30-second recap of that story.
Basically, Israelites fight Philistines. They lose. They bring the ark to battle. Lose again. The Philistines take the ark and they put it in the temple of Dagon.
What happens by the end of that story?
By the end of the story, the statue of Dagon actually falls prostrate and breaks in front of the ark, and the Philistines send the ark off on cows.
Also, the
and they walk back
Philistines
to
get tumors and
yeah, that's true.
are
That's good.
cursed, and they're like, we don't want this thing lying around. You can take it back.
Yeah. So, and I want you to keep that story in mind, right? So, in 1 Samuel, you've got the story where the Ark of the Covenant is taken in battle, right? They place it in the house of their God, but that God ends up bowing before it. And then the Philistines they end up being like cursed by all this stuff. They're like breaking out in hives and all sorts of stuff. They're like, basically they end up putting the ark back on a cart and just shipping it back home, and like literally it just says that there were people out like plowing their fields, and like some cattle just like bring the ark in. They're like, hey, isn't that the Ark of the Covenant? We've been looking for that. And basically the idea is that God he just brings it back himself. So keep that in mind, because that's not how this story is going to go. Ironically, I'd say it's actually in a more beautiful way, because instead of the Gentile people being afflicted, we're actually going to have the Gentile people being blessed. But it's not by the vessels in the temple. It's by the Jewish people who are being faithful to God. Right? And so there's this irony to where, yes, they took vessels from the temple, but the vessels that really matter to God are the people. Right? And whenever they take whenever they take Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego from Jerusalem and bring them to Babylon, it actually ends up benefiting the people in Babylon. Right? And I think that's going to be it's like a twist on the story, to where I think a big part of the book of Daniel is for the first time you're beginning to see what God's ultimate plan is for non-Jewish people, right? Because most of the Old Testament's focused on the Jewish people, but now in this book you're seeing, okay, well, what does it look like for a person, one of God's people to live in a pagan land, and ultimately you're going to see that they're blessing them, and they're actually they're benefiting the people there. To where it is a reversal of the story, to where instead of them being breaking out in tumors and all this stuff, they actually they're being blessed, and they don't want to send them back home. They're like, no, we want you to stay here. Whenever you get to the book of Nehemiah, the king's like, Nehemiah, I actually really like you. I'll let you go down there for a little bit, but can you come back? Because I really want you here.
It's like the covenant of Abraham, how it's supposed to be.
Yes, yeah, it's I will bless the nations through you. And so I just want I think it's important for us to keep that story in mind. I think little details like that are probably, so for us, I think nowadays it's easy for us to think, oh, that's a bit of a stretch of a connection. It really isn't, though. If you're not super familiar with the Old Testament, it might feel that way. But the Jewish people, this is what they were called to study every single day. And whenever you're reading a book that you've studied every single day, you're going to pick up on little connections like that. You're like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. And you're expecting, oh, I can't wait to see this, Babylon crumble beneath and God's going to bring them vessels back. But God's I actually don't care about the vessels. Yeah. I'm going to bring the people back. But the people, while they're there, are actually going to bless the nations that they're serving, which is interesting. Which I also think that this whole book is going to give us an insight for how do we as Christians live in a world that does not serve Christ. So I think there's going to be a lot of very good practical applications.
This is essentially, definitely a little different, but what's going on here.
Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of very practical application throughout this book. So they bring to the house of God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Then the king said to Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal seed and of the nobles.
So, by royal seed, I'm assuming we're talking about the line of David, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or at the very least of the tribe of Judah. That's interesting. That gives us a little genealogical fact about Daniel and his friends that most people probably overlook. It seems like he's related, he's he has royal lineage, right? He's not just any Jew. It seems like he actually was, he was royalty, which is kind of cool. So, let's ask this. Why do you think that this is one of the Why do you think they took some of the elites and the royalty first?
Well, I would say that's because they were the most likely to resist and they provided the most stability
Yeah.
to the nation. And if they were able to take them out, they knew the order of things, they knew the system, they knew the land. If they were able to take the nobles out, they could, okay, we'll just install a new system because the servants and the slaves, all they do is they know how to work in the fields and serve us. They're really not going to be able to get together and revolt. And then if they become an issue, we can just take out more people.
Yeah, so there's the practical aspect of just if you take out the nobility, you're crippling the government, and also it's like the nobles aren't out there working the fields, and so they wouldn't be very good as slaves. And so it makes sense, leave the poor people to work the land, bring the nobles over here. But then also practically speaking, why is it beneficial to them to have nobles now in their area?
Like ones who like know the language and the people, and they're kind of like they can kind of become like intermediaries.
Yeah, they're like emissaries and stuff. Like they can be middlemen, and then also nobles are just going to be more educated, to where it's easier to teach a noble the ways of the land, right?
Yeah, because like Gedaliah, he was a Jew, right? Or
yes,
so it's like they can put like they can essentially like re-educate Jews and put them back over their land, and it's going to roll better with the Jews than complete strangers.
Yeah. So there's a very practical reason behind all this. And so the king says to the chief of the officials to bring in some of the sons of Israel. And I like that each of these is like kind of getting more specific. So it's sons of Israel, which is just Israelite, right? Including some of the royal seed and of the nobles. So at the very least, they're nobility, but it's also possible that they are actual descendants of David, if not just the tribe of Judah in general, which is kind of cool. But verse 4 is where there's some cool stuff here too. So he continues to describe them. Youths in whom was no defect, who were good in appearance, showing insight in every branch of wisdom, being thoroughly knowledgeable and discerning knowledge, and who had ability to stand in the king's palace. Alright, let's break down each of those. Youths in whom was no defect.
What's the word for defects?
That's I'm pulling that up right now.
See, I don't know why this is probably not related at all, but every time I like the phrase, it always makes me think of with is it Nathaniel, where it's like in whom there is no deceit.
Oh yes.
Just the phrase like in whom there was no.
So I do think that word in particular is probably one of the most important words that we need to address in this verse. But before we get to that, what's the first thing we learn about them there?
They're young.
They're young, right? And so one thing we're going to see about Daniel is that this book spans basically his entire life. Whenever he arrives in Babylon, he's probably a teenager, right? Like he's young, unmarried. He's probably between I'd imagine probably 15 and 18 at this point. And he's going to be here for 70 years, which means that he might have been even younger than that if you're considering the lifespan of these guys. And so it's going to span his entire life. He's going to be here a really long time. Beginning of the book, he's just a teenager. End of the book, he's an old man. Because Daniel is one of these guys. So I also, it's important, I think, for us to keep in mind the fact how young they are, given how they're going to respond in this book. Because to me, books like this, it gives us a lot of hope for youth. Maybe youth are actually capable of more than we usually give them credit for. I think our youth currently are a lot less mature than they could be. But just keep that in mind. Okay, no defect. The Hebrew word here is for defect is me'un. Shows up 22 times. Do you want to guess where a pretty good portion, what book of the Bible, a pretty good portion of those appearances show up? Where do we read it's in the Old Testament. Where do we read about a bunch of things being described as having defect, without defect?
The cleanliness laws, like Leviticus. Clean,
yes.
unclean.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, Leviticus. What two things in Leviticus are typically, whenever God's talking about things being without defect, there's usually two things that he's got in mind. Two things where he says these have to be without defect.
The sacrifices?
Sacrifices, that's one of them. And then...
I could be wrong here, but the people entering the temple, they must be of clean nature.
Yes, what are those people called? People who go to the temple. think about it. What's the name of the book? Leviticus?
Leviticus, Levites.
The Levites, who are the priests, right? So priests and sacrifices are things which are described as being without defect. And they have to be, right? A sacrifice that has a defect is not a fit sacrifice. A priest that has a defect cannot be a priest. It's interesting that this word is used here, because it does not show up that many times in the Bible. Especially because we know that they're not Levites, because they're of the royal seed, right? And if you're from Judah, you're not from Levi, right? Like that's kind of how that works. If you're from this tribe, you're not from the other tribe.
Yeah.
And so we know that they are not priests, yet the author goes out of his way to ascribe to them a quality that is usually ascribed to sacrifices and to priests. I think that indicates to us how the author wants us to view these characters in the story going forward.
Well, I would.
What is he saying about them? Yeah.
I would say that the author wants us to interpret these men as young, impressionable people.
Okay.
Who can be influenced, and they're perfect, handsome, young, extremely attractive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's the straightforward aspect, but I'm saying I think that he's intentionally trying to get us to associate them with a sacrifice and a priest, because I think that's part of their purpose in the story. So let me ask you this: what is the purpose of a priest? Like, what is their job?
To intercede
Between who?
between man and God.
Between man and God.
Well, between, I guess, specifically the Israelites and God.
Yeah. So a priest intermediates between God and man. What's interesting, though, is that these people, they're not in their land. They are not at their temple. But instead, they are being brought before a Gentile king. But they're representatives of the God of Israel. And so I think that they're functioning in a priestly role. They are not Levites. They could never be Levites. They could not minister in the temple, but they can minister to this king. Right? And so they're without defect, right? So this is giving you an idea, they're functioning in a priestly role. But also, they're functioning in a sacrificial role.
It's like already clicking stuff in my head.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
So,
that makes sense.
are we, what are sacrifices?
Atonement for sin.
They're atonement for sin, but also, quite literally, what do you do with the sacrifice?
Like you're slaughtering
Kill
an
it,
animal.
slaughter it.
You slaughter it in order to worship God, right? Well, guess what? Several times throughout this book, we're going to see these people be put in situations where their life is at stake, and they willfully lay down their lives for the glory of God. But then God spares them, right? So you're going to have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being thrown literally into a fiery furnace, yet they're not going to burn. You're going to have Daniel being thrown into a den of lions, yet he's not going to be consumed. But the thing is, they're willing to. Right? And the reason why is because they are, this is like whenever Paul talks about offering yourself as a living sacrifice, that's what these guys are doing. And so, again, whenever I'm talking about, practical application, literally just the description of them as being without defect lets us know what our role is as Christians in a world that is not Christian. Right? We are called to be living sacrifices, and we are called to be, like priests. Right? We're supposed to be the middleman. We point people towards God. And we have to realize that when people interact with us, it is our primary duty to help point them towards Him. And the way we do that is by offering our lives as living sacrifices, right? To where every single thing we're doing is meant to point them towards Him. And if you understand that, it'll make sense the things that they do going forward. Because it seems like Daniel and his friends, they understand that's their responsibility. And it's going to shape, I think this chapter is an example of that, right? Like I said, this chapter is just an introduction. And I think it's just giving us a glimpse of what their life was like in Babylon, to where they probably were experiencing stuff like we're going to read in this chapter all the time. But this is just a glimpse, right? And these were the type of decisions they were having to make because they knew, okay, we are representatives of the one true God, and we're living in the land that literally represents the nations being scattered, right? Babylon is where the nations were dispersed. And now we are back here, and it is our job to help bring people back together, right? Not by glorifying ourselves, by glorifying our Maker, right?
Yeah.
And
it's
so
it's cool. It's like in First Peter it talks about being holy, for I am holy, and how
Yes.
with the
keep
how
your
he
conduct
says-
pure amongst the Gentiles.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he even says you are a nation of holy priests.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just keep it I love just the phrase "no defect." It lets you know so much of how the author's portraying these guys. So they're youths in whom there was no defect. They were good in appearance. Where do we typically see phrases like that? I don't know if that's a specific.
Okay, this
Sounds familiar.
again. I could be pointing at the wrong place here, but this points me back to Judges, in a way.
Okay.
Samson.
Oh, okay.
Like, because, and again, I probably need to go back through Judges and look at it in more detail for this analysis, but generally when you pick the judges in that time, normally it's people of good moral character, attractive in appearance, outstanding in the community, in the kingdom.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like whenever you get to the kings and stuff, you have Saul, who's just like tall, dark, and handsome, and then you got David, and David's like, it says he was ruddy and he was good in appearance. And so I think you typically associate this imagery with like royalty. And you're going to notice that that's mainly what the Babylonians are doing. They're just picking people who are like, like perfect specimens to like surround themselves with, right? So they're youths in whom there's no defect. They're good in appearance. They're showing insight in every branch of wisdom. So they're actually like, they're very knowledgeable. And wisdom, again, it's practical, like how to live. Whenever you think of wisdom, it's not necessarily like saying like they have like endless like encyclopedic knowledge of everything. It's saying that they knew how to practically live in a good and wise way. But they were also thoroughly knowledgeable and discerning in knowledge. So in addition to knowing how to conduct themselves in life, they also did have a lot of information in their heads, and they were good at discerning information. And they had the ability to stand in the king's palace. Why? Because they already had a noble background. And he said for him to teach them the literature and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Who are the Chaldeans?
Babylonians.
Yeah, it's another name for the Babylonians. That's why I was saying that Abraham was from there, because it says he came from Ur of the Chaldeans. So it's the same thing. Okay, so teaching them the literature and the tongue of the Chaldeans. What is the tongue of the Chaldeans? Aramaic, which is why chapters 2 through 7 will be written in Aramaic. Look at that. Daniel's like, that's really what happened. Daniel was just like writing in Hebrew, and they're like, "What are you writing in?" He's like, "Aramaic," and just like he just wrote chapters 2 through 7 in Aramaic. They finally looked away. He's like, "Phew, back to Hebrew." We're over here reading way too deeply into it. He's just like, my tutor was looking over my shoulder. Okay, but then the literature of the Babylonians. Do we know of any literature that they might have become versed in?
I'm assuming like maybe texts they had related to worship of their gods could be part of it, and just becoming familiar with their rituals.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like Gilgamesh, huh?
Gilgamesh epic, like Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish.
Yeah,
like those are things that exist to this day where you can literally just go read them. They're very interesting to read because it seems like there's things in the Bible which are intentionally calling back to those things. Like it's like even Genesis chapter 1 is like, it seems like very clearly like taking a dig at like the Enuma Elish being like, our God's better than your God. Ha. And so it's interesting, but like they were educated in this literature as well, which I think there's a benefit to that. I think that them being educated in the customs and the culture of the world around them is going to allow them to better serve the Babylonians.
Yeah.
And I would actually say, practically speaking, that's important for us too. That's why, like, to me, like, whenever it comes to, like, I don't know, like there's a lot of Christians I know who, like, they will, like, only allow themselves to watch movies that you could, like, buy at Mardell or something like that. Like, it's like, like, if it can't be sold or bought at Mardell, I'm not going to read it. Which I would actually say that there's a lot of stuff that's at Mardell that I would never even touch. But, like they sell a bunch of stuff. I'm like, oh, I wish that you would, like whenever I'm there with Brianna, I just, like, flip books upside down and, like, slide them.
I think what you're referencing is, like, purity culture and purity Christianity, where it's exactly what you said. I'm only going to touch things that are, like, Bible related in Christianity.
But the issue with that is that you're basically creating a bunch of monks who do not know how to actually bless the world around them, and usually they end up becoming very legalistic because they literally do not know how to interact with somebody who does not hold their exact same
beliefs. And then you get a Pharisee-like situation.
Which is problematic, right? Mm-hmm. We need to be, the way the Bible puts it, in the world but not of it, mm-hmm. right? And the way you live in the world is by being accustomed with, like, the things of the world while also recognizing that you have to define your lifestyle by things that honor God. And so that's why, like, to me, it's like, I think it's actually important for us, like, if there's, like, popular movies that everybody's watching, as Christians, go watch it. I mean, unless it's just, like, just straight up, like, pornographic. Maybe just avoid that, right? Just look up a synopsis or something. But, no, but, like, it's important because the thing is, we need to learn to speak our culture's language. Mm-hmm. And we live in a world right now where the culture is just, like, it's like a melting pot, where everybody does different things. But if you're ever going to reach people, you need to learn to speak their tongue and, like, understand, Like I remember like whenever I had like certain students, they were all reading the Summer I Turned Pretty books. I sat down. I read through all 3 of those bad boys. It like they were terrible. But the thing is, but it gave me so much insight for my students because like especially like the girls in my classes, I was like, okay, like I am like there were certain times where like they would try to talk to me about like relationship stuff, and I was like I don't even understand what you're saying right now. But it's because my view of relationships has been so shaped by scripture that whenever I watch any, like if I watch a Hallmark movie, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is not romance. This is infatuation, right? Like,
Yeah.
But for them, it's like they were reading this stuff, and by reading it, it enabled me to minister to them better. Because I was like, okay, now I get what you view as love, and it's important for us to kind of be familiar with that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like, you know. If I'm gonna talk like I will actively try to go read the Book of Mormon, go read the Quran. We're on the side of truth, and so it'll ultimately pan out in our favor, I think. But the thing is, I get frustrated whenever people, they'll bash other people's beliefs without actually engaging with them seriously, right? It's very easy to go on YouTube and look up like a 5-minute argument about why Islam is false, and then you can just like go like make this very like caricature version of Islam. Well, no, just engage with the actual stuff. And figure out what they actually believe so that you can have like good faith conversations, right? Like we don't like people making a caricature of our faith, so let's not do that to them.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a benefit to being educated in this way.
And you especially see that I see it a lot online, and I'm guilty of it 2 times. And me and you have had this conversation today, where it's just like you're so tempted to go up to them and be like, "Oh, Muhammad did like married a 6-year-old, da 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 da." Well, it's just like no, take a step back. That's not how to bring people closer to Christ. You straight up just go guns blazing in there.
Yeah, we're all guilty of it, and I think the whole goal is, Jesus says, do to others as you would have them do to you, right? If you don't want people making a mockery of your faith, well, try to take them seriously and try to get to understand them, like try to view them as actual people who you're trying to love, and that usually means, metaphorically speaking their language and reading their literature. It's like get to know them at their level.
It's not about just being right; it's about loving them.
Yeah. And so, but in this case, Daniel and them, they're not actually, it's not like they're choosing to do this. They are slaves being brought in and they're being forcibly educated. But it doesn't seem like they're resisting. And that's actually kind of that's what's interesting about the story, is that there is a point where Daniel is going to resist. But a lot of stuff he's fine with. He's like, yeah, okay, you can teach me your literature. Okay, yeah, you can teach me your language. That's fine. Whereas I think there's a lot of Christians who would draw the line a lot sooner, right? I mean, we're drawing lines at halftime shows. We're like, oh no! I'm not watching that.
To be fair,
we're not getting into a discussion about the halftime show. I had to bring it up because Sean and I were talking about it earlier, and I was like, I feel like this whole thing was blown way out of proportion, where I don't even understand why it was so controversial. We can talk about it later. But it's just like this is just wild to me. Mainly because it seems like it was more of a political issue than an actual religious issue, but it was a lot of Christians who were making it sound like it was a Christian thing. I was like, I think it's just politics.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and that's why it annoys me, because it's like we conflate them. I'm like,
Yes.
if you conflate them too much, I mean, then Daniel and his friends would be in a really weird place because they are actively serving a pagan king. And so, I don't know. Anyways, Daniel and them go along with this, right? Teach us your literature. Teach us your tongue. All right? And the king appointed for them a daily ration from the king's choice food and from the wine which he drank. And he appointed that they should be educated for 3 years, at the end of which they were to stand before the king. All right, so what happens here?
It actually sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I guess there's certain things they're not going to eat, but it's actually pretty generous.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's actually important for us to recognize that, because it makes their response so shocking. Because it sounds like they're getting a pretty good deal. It's like they're not just getting regular people food. It seems like he's trying to if they're going to be in captivity, he's trying to suck up to them and hey, I'll give you like choice food. And Daniel's not like, yeah, give me the choice. No, that's where he's going to draw the line. He's like, okay, you can teach us your literature stuff. I will not eat that though, which is interesting. We'll have to talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, we'll give them the choice food, the wine which he drank, right? And he appointed they should be educated 3 years, right? So they're going to spend 3 years in training, at which point they were to stand before him as servants, right? So they're probably going to be cupbearers and, bakers and stuff like that. They're just going to be servants of the king. But servants who are treated well. Now among them, from the sons of Judah, were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials set names for them. And for Daniel, he set the name Belteshazzar, for Hananiah, Shadrach, for Mishael, Meshach, and for Azariah, Abednego. All right. So, what do we have there?
Well, they get their names changed.
They get their names changed.
Okay, so one kind of curious thing kind of crossed my mind. So when we reference the story with the furnace and Nebuchadnezzar, right, and Meshach, Rashach, and Abednego later, right? Why do we keep calling Daniel instead of Belteshazzar?
Mm-hmm.
And we call Hananiah I can't pronounce these names.
Mishael and Azariah.
Mishael and Azariah. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like, why are we not just calling them the Aramaic names?
It's a great question, right? Because we call Daniel by his original Hebrew name, whereas we call the other guys by their Babylonian names. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer right off the bat, but I think it's something we're going to have to explore. And to be fair, I think it will go back and forth a little bit, but
It's probably just because the chapter we know most of within it is a chapter where it's in Aramaic.
yes.
Guessing.
Yeah. So I think that is a big component of it. I think at the very least, what this tells us is, and I think that application here, which is I think is cool, they don't even necessarily resist having their names changed, right? Daniel goes by his name, but also he's the author of the book. And so it makes sense why he's like preserving that. But it seems to imply that they are literally willing to have everything about them changed. You can change my name, you can change my language, you can change what I read, but I'm not going to eat that food. Which is that's interesting to me. It's like where they draw the line, we're going to have to figure out why they draw the line there.
Well,
Because it's already established that they are discerning people.
My
Yes.
my
Yeah.
hypothesis as to that is maybe the food is unclean. Maybe the
Yeah.
king's serving
Well, so
pigs.
we'll get to it in the following verses. But I think that I'm glad you pointed out the fact that the names are like that we go by Babylonian names on one hand and the Jewish name on the other. Because whenever we get to their chapters, we're probably gonna have to come to it again. But I have another question for you. Is there anybody else in the Bible whose name is changed in a way such as this? And specifically, what I mean is I'm not talking like Abram to Abraham. I'm talking a foreign people changing their name to something else.
Are we referencing the issue in Kings again, or is this? Are you gonna
No, I'm thinking. I mean, I guess that does happen there. So those are some examples, like the Kings.
Yes.
But I'm thinking of people who have like more of a bigger story.
Okay.
It's not somebody else changing their name. I was thinking about in Ruth. Naomi changes her name because of
Okay,
despair and
yeah.
desperation.
So there's that. Yeah, she changed her name to Mara.
You're talking about Old Testament?
Old Testament.
Okay.
There's really three particular instances I'm thinking of.
Like a foreign person changes
A foreign
their name.
person changes the name. To be fair, one of the instances we actually don't ever like the person's so young that we actually don't know their Hebrew name, because they were a baby.
Would be Moses one of them?
Moses, that's what I'm talking
Because he
about.
was named by the Egyptians.
Yeah, he was named by Pharaoh's daughter,
Yeah.
Oh.
right? She's drawn from the water and she names him Moshe, which means to be drawn out.
Was Joseph?
Joseph, yes, Joseph. His name is changed to Zaphath Paneah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're right.
And then there's one other person. We haven't gotten to their story yet, but I did mention her earlier.
Esther?
Esther.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
her name isn't actually Esther. It is Hadassah,
Mm-hmm.
right? But her name is changed to Esther, which I'm pretty sure comes from like Ishtar, like the goddess.
Oh, probably.
Yeah. And so there's three examples. Now my question: so we got Joseph, Moses, Esther. What do all three of them have in common?
Okay. So all of them bring God's people to some place. Joseph essentially brings God's people into Egypt, right? Moses takes God's people out of Egypt.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not that familiar with Esther.
Me neither, so I'm drawing a blank there.
I'm just thinking.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about like them being in situations where they're like in a like they're basically in like a state of like exile where it's like Israel is in Egypt or Israel is like in Persia or Israel is in Babylon.
Yeah. So all three of them are placed in a situation where they are placed in positions of power in a foreign land to deliver the people of God.
Gotcha.
Right? So
Ah,
Joseph,
okay.
right? So Joseph is elevated in Egypt, and by the end of the story, he ends up bringing all of his brothers to the land, and he says, it was what you meant for evil, the Lord meant for good. I was brought here so that many might live, right? So he was in a foreign land, position of power to deliver the people. Moses, elevated up in Pharaoh's courts, ultimately fled Pharaoh's courts because he killed a guy. But then he comes back, delivers the people from a foreign oppressor. Esther, she's the queen, right? But then there's, apparently somebody's wanting to kill a bunch of the Jews. She has to go in, confront the king, and ask him to spare the people, right? And so all three of them are nobility in a pagan land. And the question becomes, who is their devotion going to be to? God and his people, or to the foreign king? Now you've got Daniel and his three friends, and they're in a very similar place, right? To where they are also in a place where, okay, we're living in a pagan land, they're being elevated to a high status, and the question is, who are they going to serve, right? And so far, they're speaking a different language, they're reading different books, their names are different, and you're like, uh-oh. And keep in mind, they're young, right? I mean, if you're wanting to, kids they're impressionable, right? If you grab a teenager, they'll believe anything. They're just they're gullible as heck, right? And so, if you brought a 70-year-old man from Jerusalem and brought him over, he'd be like, I'm not conforming to your ways. Whereas, think about it. Daniel and his friends, they grew up in a kingdom that was falling apart. And now, they are being brought to royal courts. And they're being fed amazing food. And they're being treated like royalty. You put any other teenager in that situation, they're like, all right, this is great. Forget God, I'm here for this. But the question becomes, what are Daniel and his friends
And
doing?
you're pointing out one other thing, right? That you're also pointing out that inherent power is corrupting.
It can be.
Corrupting.
It can be. What's going to be interesting about Daniel and his friends is that they resist the corruption, which makes them remarkable. Because 99% of people would just go with it, right? Even us. Think about it. Imagine that you, let me say this. In the verses we're about to see, it doesn't appear like Nebuchadnezzar is asking them to do anything that would explicitly cause them to disobey them, right? What they're going to do is it's a personal choice that they make. 99% of people when put in that situation, probably 99.9% of people when put in that situation would just go along with it, right? It's hey, it benefits me. The Bible doesn't say I can't do it. I'm going to do it, right? But Daniel and his friends are going to make a different choice. And so let's get to that, right? So they speak a different language. They're reading different books. Their names are changed. And now there's this dramatic moment where they, like Joseph, like Moses, like Esther, they're in this place of power, and the question becomes, who are they going to serve? And ultimately, I think the message is ultimately they're going to be delivering the people, right? Daniel and his friends are ultimately the ones who are going to be elevated to this position of power, like Joseph, Moses, and Esther, so that whenever the exile actually comes to fruition and the Jewish people come, you've got Jewish people who are already in places of power who can serve them and take care of them in exile, right? So you've kind of got God taking care of his people even in Babylon, which is kind of cool. And so, also just to foreshadow where we're heading here, this is not the only connection that Daniel's going to have with Joseph. What was Joseph mainly known for? Well, what was he really good at doing? This is how he got elevated in those steps. He was good at interpreting dreams. Well, that's what Daniel's also going to be really good at. So, Daniel and Joseph, as we go through this, you're going to have to read those stories kind of side by side. Okay, verse 8. But Daniel set in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food, or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself.
Okay, so I think I touched on this briefly earlier, but my hypothesis, at least with the food, as to why, is maybe the king was eating or consuming something in Jewish culture that would be considered unclean. For example, pork.
Okay.
Something we were talking about at my church was that they were probably foods that were sacrificed for their gods, so they were unclean that way.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, that is most likely what's going on here. Because what we're going to notice, there's nothing within the text which says that these were unclean foods, right? That's the language you would typically expect to see. because whenever you're like, especially like it seems like the author, he knows Leviticus, and so you would think and say, oh, he would not defile himself by eating an unclean food, but it never says that. So it seems like more likely the issue that Daniel has is the fact that these were sacrificed to pagan gods. But the thing is, I mean, we know from the New Testament that, I mean, Paul's over here like, hey, like, that God's not even real. Like, just eat the food. Like, he says, like, if it causes your brother to stumble, don't eat it. And so we know that technically, even if a meat is sacrificed to a pagan god, that doesn't inherently mean that it's, like, off limits. Right? And so that's why I'm saying that, like ultimately, it does not explain what about the food was defiling. But it does seem like Daniel is drawing the line in the sand by something that technically would not be violating Scripture, right? I mean, there are things in the Torah which would suggest, hey, stay away from food that's like it kind of implies that would be sacrificed to other gods and stuff like that. But it seems like this is more like a gray area, is what I'm trying to get at. And the fact that it doesn't elaborate, I think, is the author trying to allow us to be content with it being a gray area, right? Like, the author doesn't go out of his way to be like, and here's why it was defiling. It just says, this is where Daniel drew the line, right? Something about eating the king's choice food or the wine. Like, the wine thing is the thing that's, like, curious, because, like, it's like, okay, something's going on there. But something about those things, he said, no, I'm drawing the line and I will not do that. And it says he said it in his heart. He would not defile himself. And even the word for defile there, that's a word, it only shows up, how many times is it? It only shows up 11 times in Scripture, and all of them are in, like, exilic times. So it shows up, like, once in Ezra, once in Nehemiah, twice in Isaiah, once in Lamentations, once in Daniel, and then in Zephaniah, and twice in Malachi. So it's all, like, later time period. When this word shows up, so it's not anything that's associated with the Torah itself, which I think that's significant, right?
Yeah.
To where he's not drawing the line on something where it's like a very clear, oh, that would be violating the Torah. It's something where it's a personal conviction in his heart. So Daniel's in his heart. He would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. All right, so let's just real quickly break down some application there.
So
since it doesn't explain what the source of this is, what is this just in general communicating?
in general, it's communicating he's setting himself apart.
Yes. What does it seem like his main concern is? Like
Gluttony?
I don't think it's gluttony.
Like making himself not clean before God? Because he's saying defile himself? Like he's worried about, like, I don't know, like, I would imagine he's thinking about, like, the law in his head. And he's not wanting to, like, break the law because he knows that, like, God holds it to a high standard.
Yeah. It could be that, but again, I don't think that there's nothing in it that specifically says that it would be breaking the law.
Do you think like it's a matter of conscience, or?
Well, I think it's a matter of conscience, but I'm saying, what do you think it is that's in his conscience that's bugging him? I think that you're on the right track. I just don't think it's necessarily directly tied to the law. I think it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. This actually is something that Paul would really appreciate in Galatians, probably. Because ultimately, what was the law supposed to drive us towards? Like, what was the law the end-all, be-all? Like, was that the end goal?
No, the law, it seems like, was to point out imperfections and tell us, like, as in the New Testament, we interpret that as, like, why we need Jesus. But in the Old Testament, it was more so to point out, like, that the people, that they're not perfect.
Yeah, but ultimately, even from the time of Abraham, where did righteousness come from?
From God.
From God, but specifically, Genesis 15. Faith, right? It was Abraham's faith. It says Abraham believed and it was counted him as righteousness. Right? And we've talked about how I think that sometimes the word faith, like, we misunderstand what it's really saying there. A better translation would probably be allegiance or devotion or trust, right? Whereas faith, whenever we think faith, we just think like a set of doctrines, whereas it's like, no, your allegiance is to God. I think that's at the heart of what Daniel is struggling with here, right? It's not necessarily that what he'd be doing would be a direct violation of Torah. It's that he doesn't want to allow himself to be given entirely over to Babylon, right? It's like, he's like, I've got to draw a line to where it's like, I will do certain things, but I've got to do something that allows me to express my devotion to God to where I'm not full Babylonian, right? Like I'm gonna go out of my way to set myself apart from everybody else, right? And you gotta be careful because this is where if you go too far with it, you could become legalistic. Because if the moment you start enforcing this on everybody else, you become legalistic, right? That's the issue with like the Pharisees in the New Testament, right? Where they're like, here's 39 categories of work, and you can't do any of them. If you wanted to hold yourself to that, that's one thing. But whenever you enforce on everybody else, you become a legalist. But if you're just holding yourself to this higher standard, that's totally fine, right? Like a good example would be like drinking alcohol, right? The Bible's totally fine with people drinking alcohol. But if a person wants to say, you know what, I'm going to abstain from alcohol to set myself apart, good, do it. But don't go around being like, ugh, you can't look down on other people for drinking alcohol, right? Or the same thing like tattoos, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well everybody else has tattoos, I'm not going to get some just to be set apart, right? But the moment you start looking down on others for it, you become legalistic, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of what Daniel's going for. That's why he said it in his heart, right? It's not like it was like, oh, he read a command in Torah, he's like, whoa, I can't do that. No, it was a conviction where he says, okay, like I can speak their language, I can read their books, I can even change my name, but I cannot allow myself to change who I belong to. And therefore, I've got to do something to make it clear that I'm set apart. And notice that in this instance, he's specifically denying himself that would be convenient to him, right? It's inconvenient to change your language. It's inconvenient to read different books. It's inconvenient to have your name changed. The only good thing he got out of this was really good food. And he says, I don't want the food. So like that's like the opposite of what we would typically want, right? Like Christians, like whenever we think of how do I serve the world around me, we're like, well, if I can just get to a place of prominence, then I can serve the people. It's like, well, no, actually, maybe it's denying yourself the place of prominence. Where Daniel's actually saying, no, you can keep the food. Why? Well, because I worship the God of Israel, and I want to do things different for him. Like it's literally just a matter of expressing himself in a like to him in his heart, it would be defiling to take bread from a pagan king. It's like, no, that's your bread. I'll allow God to feed me, basically.
Yeah, this is like a thought in my head, so it may not like be the case, but is it possible that like this and maybe just like the story of Daniel in general too, in the greater narrative of Scripture, part of the whole issue has been the fact that like Israel has not been able to like obey Torah properly, but the kind of the flip of that is that the Torah has to be like on the heart, right?
Yes.
And I was just thinking like part of the whole thing with like God's plan is that God is going to like through the exile he's going and afterwards he's going to write the law on their hearts. Is it possible that this is also like a snippet of like what it looks like to obey Torah in that sense, like to properly?
I think it could be, just because one thing that's interesting about Daniel is that pretty much every other character in Scripture other than Jesus, like whenever you see them, like even like a righteous character, you see their faults as well, right? Whether it's Abraham, Noah, David, righteous guys, but you see that they're imperfect. Whereas the book of Daniel never highlights like a sin of Daniel or Shadrach or Meshach. Like it kind of portrays them as like these ideal figures. So like obviously they were sinful. But it doesn't highlight that, and so I think that the purpose of the book is kind of to try to get you to the heart of like it's not saying that they're like new covenant believers who have like had their hearts transformed, but I think it is getting to the heart of that where it's like it's not accidental. It says he said it in his heart, right?
Yeah.
It was like I read a quote that I really liked about this. People were saying when everything else is removed, like the Torah, the temple, and all like Jerusalem, faithfulness is the only thing that is remaining to make you distinct, right? So, like Daniel's working through this, like, okay, I can't go to Jerusalem. I don't have the temple. I literally cannot follow the Torah because I'm living in a foreign land. They're not going to observe kosher rules. They're not going to allow, we live in a different culture that has a different law. I can't do any of those things. The only thing I have is my devotion to God. And so I need to find different ways to express that devotion in a world that doesn't serve him. And so I think it really is getting to the heart of it, to where you see that it's literally not derived from the Torah; it's just derived from his faith. Yeah. Right? It's like this is what it looks like to serve God in a world that's ruled by people who don't serve God. You're like, okay, you're thinking, how can I actively show my faith in a practical way that doesn't get me glory? right? Whereas a lot of times as Christians, that's where we mess up. We're like, how do I show my faith to people? It's like, well, I'm just gonna go invite them to church, and I'm gonna go preach on the street corners. Where it's like, well, no, it's like it's more subtle ways. It's like, let me go out of my way to sacrificially serve somebody without ever receiving credit. Let me go out of my way to like sacrifice myself and to cost I'm trying to think of the word to cost something for myself. What was I can't even think how to word it. Just something that doesn't benefit me at all, right?
Yeah.
At cost to myself, benefit somebody else, right? That's the type of stuff that we need to be thinking of, right? That's how you genuinely demonstrate your faithfulness to God. It's not rubbing in somebody's face and being like, hey, by the way, I'm a Christian. Like, no, because ultimately what you're doing there is you're trying to glorify yourself. You're trying to be like, hey, look at me. I'm like special and righteous. It's like, well, no. Your goal is just to serve God, right? And give him the glory. And then if somebody asks you, why are you doing that? Well, I believe that there's a God who created the heavens and the earth, and he has chosen us. And he has called us to live like him and to be holy and to love others as he loves us. And it's like, oh, okay. Like then there's an explanation behind it, right? And so it seems like that's what's at the heart of Daniel's thing here. And so he's not coming here guns blazing being like, I will not eat this food. Instead, it says that he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. He just said, hey, like he's like pulled him aside, he's like, hey, I get what you're doing here. I just want to ask, is it possible for me to just like have a different diet? Like it's a personal conviction. I know you don't have to honor it, but I would like to set myself apart in some way, just so that I don't get absorbed into Babylon entirely, right? Like I want to maintain my Jewish identity somehow, right? Like I'm devoted to this God. I can't abandon him, and I need some way to express it. Can I just eat a different diet? And then there's going to be other places where they take their stand as well, right? Later on, I'm not bowing before the statue. I'm not going to stop praying to him, right? But this is just like a very subtle and simple way. And then verse 9. Remember, this is where we talk about, this is like the climax of the chapter. Now God granted Daniel hesed, loving kindness, and compassion before the commander of the officials. Who does that sound like? Is there anybody else? We usually associate David with like the word hesed and stuff. But is there anybody else who has dwelt in a pagan land as a slave or prisoner of some sort, but who experienced compassion and grace from the people in charge of him? Joseph, yes, right. Whenever he was with Potiphar, he experienced. He was elevated. Whenever he was in the prison, he was elevated. Whenever he was before Pharaoh, he was elevated. So it's all calling back to the same story. And so God granted Daniel hesed and compassion. What do those two things imply?
He didn't deserve it.
Yep. Yeah, he didn't necessarily deserve it. Because, the official could have said no. Right? And compassion.
Is it like a level of understanding?
Yeah, so...
From the commander? Like, it wasn't like... I don't know, like, maybe, like, he didn't look at him in full disgust. Like, how dare you say that? Like, he kind of, like, honored, like, okay, I don't worship the God that you worship, but that's really cool that you are so devoted to him that you'd be willing to do this.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like respect almost in a way.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that ties back to the hesed thing, because whenever we talk about hesed, we say it's not even just not deserving it, it's having no right to expect it.
Yeah.
Whereas you would expect this conversation to go a different way,
Yeah.
especially because it seems like the purpose of this whole 3-year tutoring program is to assimilate them fully into Babylonian culture. And Daniel's over here being like, hey, I would like to not fully assimilate. Like, you would expect them to be like, too bad. Like, it's like that's the whole like I know you don't want to be part of Babylon, but you probably didn't want Jerusalem destroyed either, but like, here you are. Like, you would expect them to push back on this, but that's why it says, well, God allowed them to actually go along with this, right? It's like Daniel probably did not expect them to go along with this. He was like, okay, it's just a shot in the dark. Like, hey, I know the answer's probably no, but can I just eat a different diet? And the guy like looks at him like he has compassion. He's like, no, I get it. Like, that's hard. And it's almost like he's like putting him in Daniel's place, like himself in Daniel's place. He's like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, and I empathize with that. But he doesn't immediately just like say, yeah, let's do it, because he has concerns of his own. Because keep in mind, he is a man under authority, and he does not have the permission to just like not do that, right? Like, the king is the one who told him to do this, and
Yeah.
if this backfires on him, he's losing his life. And so the commander of the officials said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. I would say this is a very practical scenario. But again, it's still unexpected because you would expect him to just say no. And this actually even elevates why he would say no, because it's putting his own life on the line. He's like he'd be like, no, dude, like I don't care about you or your God. I don't even know who you are. That would put my life on the line, and that's just a hard no. Like that's what you would expect. The fact that the guy even tolerates the idea is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
But he's like, I don't know. Like, it's not really, that's not my duty to say yes or no. He's like, the king told me to do this. The king's the one in charge of your food. And he's also probably very confused by this, right? I can't, like, I have to imagine he's probably slightly entertained just because, like, most of the other teams are probably like, that's a lot of food. Like, you know, they had to march like thousands of miles over here to Babylon, and they're like hungry. They're like, whoa, okay, let's go. Like, there's like 3 years of basically like spa treatments and tutoring. It's like this sounds better than like slaving away on stuff. It's like it sounds like an ideal scenario. And now Daniel's like, yeah, I don't want the choice food. I want like not as good food. And the guy's like, that's a weird request, not mine to grant, but weird. And if I did grant it, I'd be killed for it because like what is his concern? Like what does he think would happen if Daniel ate the lesser food?
He would grow scrawny and he wouldn't be strong anymore.
Yeah. The whole goal, like the reason why the king is giving them this choice food is not simply because he wants them to eat well. There's practical benefits to this. He wants his servants to be healthy, right? They live in a culture where it's like, there's a reason why Jesus says, give us this day our daily bread, right? Nowadays, we have like refrigerators and stuff filled with food. We don't have to worry about where our next meal's coming from.
Yeah.
That was not the case with like most people in ancient societies. Like they just most people are living day to day, meal to meal. And the king does not want his servants living like that. And so he's like, nah, I will give you some of my food to keep you healthy so that you can serve me better. And so the official's like, I don't know, like if you eat other stuff, you're probably, you don't even have a job, right? You're a slave. Like where are you going to like get this food? Like it's not going to be high quality food. The king's providing you with like a feast. What are you going to eat? Like you're just going to end up getting scrawny and stuff, and that would kind of defeat the whole purpose. And so then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. He's like, I don't want to die. I'm not dying for you. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he said this, please test your servant for 10 days, and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. I might save this for the very end, whenever we kind of finish up. But
probably.
I want to highlight. Well, no, I'm going to talk about the vegetables thing in a second. That's what you think I'm skipping. I really like how Daniel approaches this whole conversation. It's very different than I think how most Christians like Christians nowadays we feel the need to like almost like impose our views on society, where it's like I don't know, it's like everything's like a war, where it's like, okay, it's my job to make sure everybody else does the same things that I do and believes the same way I believe. That's not what Daniel's doing here. He's just asking, right? Like he's saying, these are my convictions, and I'm not forcing them upon you, but I'm also not going to silently act like they don't exist, right? And I think that's a much better approach, right? Like, he's being very gracious here. He's not saying, sorry, I follow Yahweh, and if you aren't going to let me do this, we're going to have some beef. Like, he's not saying that. He's like, no, I get it. He's like, okay. He's like, I hear you. But he's wise, right? And so he's practically thinking through this. He's like, okay, well, let me think of a solution where we can both get what we want. What does he propose? Trial run, right? He says, okay, let's just do a temporary thing. 10 days. That's like a week and a half.
10 days out of 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, just give me 10 days, and if I do not come off better by the end, then I will eat your food. Which is really cool, because what is Daniel doing right there?
Showing his faith in God.
Showing his faith, right? Because is there any place in the Torah where God says, if you only eat this specific diet, you will end up healthy?
No.
No. But what does Daniel trust right here?
God's provision, and then he also trusts that like God sees like his heart posture and his faithfulness, and knows that like God will provide for him and make him well off so that he can best worship him.
Yeah.
Because it's like how we talk about like God is a good father. Like if you ask him for patience, or you ask him to help love better, you ask him for good things, God's not going to tell you no for those things. So if he's wanting to better worship God and be able to do things that are glorifying to him, God's not going to be like, well, no, you're not allowed to glorify me. It's like, obviously he's going to provide in that way for him.
Yeah, so Daniel's, he recognizes like, yeah, God knows my heart here, and like he's putting all the like cards in God's hand. He's like, okay, like there's no promise where God says that this diet is a special diet. We'll talk about that diet in a second. But it's literally just him saying, I trust God, and I trust not only in him, but I trust that he sees me, and he knows my convictions in my heart. And he says, okay, and there's two ways this goes, right? On one hand, if things do not come out for the best, well, then he'll just eat the food, because that will be a sign to him that God's fine with him eating the food. But on the other hand, if things work out how he was wanting them to work out, that would be God giving a seal of approval, like to where it's like, hey, yes, I appreciate you setting yourself apart from me here, and I'm going to actually reward this. But he's not rewarding it in a way that's like it doesn't like selfishly benefit Daniel, right? It's not like Daniel's making more money. It's not like Daniel's like getting like Daniel is denying himself, but prospering in the midst of it, right? And so that's like, it's not like he's like, hey, give me $1 million to see what I do with it. He's like, no, allow me to deny myself for 10 days. And if I'm not better by the end, like it's literally just trusting God with it, to where there's no way this could be spun to where it looks like he was serving himself. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like this is something we'll probably have to think through together, but these are things that we need to practically think through in our daily lives nowadays. Like what are modern ways where we can do stuff like this? Mm-hmm. Because I think so often we're just like, we're just thinking like, oh, like the Bible says don't do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Mm-hmm. But Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is constantly talking about getting to the heart of the command, mm-hmm. right? And so, it's not just about adultery, it's about lust. It's not just about murder, it's about anger, and like animosity and stuff. And so whenever we talk about like love, right? Like love our neighbors and stuff like that, we need to be thinking of ways where we can practically deny ourselves and trust that God will provide for us even when we deny ourselves, right? I think this like a practical way that this looks like, if you don't have a lot of money, even the money that you have, you use it to serve other people rather than yourself. Mm-hmm. Trusting, you know what? This could go one of two ways. Maybe I will just go bankrupt. Or maybe God will see that I'm using my money in a selfless way, and he'll actually provide for me to have the money I need, right? I might not have a mansion and stuff like that, but I will have my daily bread, right? And so I think that would be like a practical way to do that, but I think we need to think of other ways to do that as well. Whereas I think sometimes like the way that we obey God is like very like cookie cutter and like bare minimum. Whereas Daniel's not doing the bare minimum. He's going out of his way to think of ways to serve God, which I think is cool. So he proposes this whole thing. He says, please test your servant for 10 days. Let us begin with some vegetables to eat and water to drink. I have to mention the vegetables thing. It annoys me that the word is translated vegetables. In pretty much every translation, you will see it translated as vegetables. But the word here, it's verse 12. It is the word zera. Where's it at? Yeah, it's zeron. It literally just means seed. Is it translated seed there?
No, I just knew zero was seed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But it's zeron, which comes from zera. It only shows up 2 times in this particular version, and it's in verse 12 and verse 16. So it's in this passage. It doesn't show up anywhere else in Scripture. But it just means the word seed. And I don't know why they translate it as vegetables. I think it's because, I don't know, maybe the translators themselves are surprised. They're like, oh no, he couldn't possibly be sustained by just seeds. I think it's grain products. Mm-hmm. But they're like, no, that's not possible. On one hand, I think that might be an intentional callback to almost like the manna in the wilderness. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Being sustained on grain products. It's there's that. But then also there's just I mean, there's like the thematic connection of if you go back to verse 3, right? The king said to Ashpenaz to bring in the sons of Israel, including some of the royal seed and of the nobles. That's the same word, Zerah, right? And so Daniel is one of the royal seed, and now he's asking to live on a diet of seeds. Like, I think that's just like, there's like a connection there. Like, it's not a huge thematic thing. I just think that's important. And so that it's not like a big deal. I just get annoyed whenever like people just translate stuff randomly, like for no reason. I don't know. And so he says, let us eat, be given some seed and some water to drink, which I think that arguably, it even heightens what he's doing. Like, I mean, you could argue like, oh, he's just going vegetarian. No, he's not just going vegetarian. Like, it's like, just give me like some basic carbs and some like water. So he's like severely decreasing what they're going to be having. Before it was like they're going to eat like steak and like really good stuff. And now it's like, no, I want like a lot less. But he says, just 10 days. Give me a 10-day trial run to see how it goes.
Is there anything like specific about the number 10? Or that like he just picked 10 days? Because I was just thinking
I'm
like
not sure.
I don't know,
Yeah.
like 7 days. I don't know if they had 7 days in a week back then. Maybe
Yeah,
they count
they
their
did.
calendars that way. But I didn't think like why wouldn't you say like 14? You know, like that's like 2 weeks. Like why?
Yeah.
Why 10?
They do have
I
7
didn't know.
weeks. I think it's just...
I didn't know if there was a specific reason why he said 10, or if there was like another time in scripture where there's like a 10 or something, or that's just the day he chose.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is.
Okay.
But I haven't looked into it. I don't know.
Okay.
It's worth a Google.
Just like,
So then let our appearance be observed before you, and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. This is what it means whenever it says he's wise, right? I mean, there's really like, it's a win-win situation on both sides, right? He's like, okay, 10-day trial run. If we are worse off, we will eat your food. If we are better off, it's beneficial to you to let us keep doing what we're doing. And so he's fully trusting that God will like honor his conviction here and like reward him for his faithfulness. Which I just love the creativity behind that. It's like he's in this weird situation. He's like, I've never been in a situation like this. I'm gonna be creative. And again, he's a teenager, right? Most teenagers wouldn't even be thinking this. They'd just be like, huh, I want some steak. I'll take it medium rare. Like, but Daniel, like, he's like, no. Like, it shows you he's built different, right? He's a very different type of person.
I feel like him and Moses share like a very similar heart, because there's many times whenever like Moses was like appealing to God on behalf of like the Israelites, and he is like catering to like God's glory. Like he's like, I know you will answer this because it has to do with glorifying you. So I feel like they like share the same heart for like who God is and like what he means with his law and with his scripture and stuff.
And what's crazy about that is that Moses was like 80 years old by the time he got there.
He should
Whereas
be that wise.
Daniel's like a teenager. Like it's like
Yeah,
that's
well,
crazy.
Yeah. I don't think it's like necessarily
He
an
must have been.
intentional connection, but I think it's kind of cool. It is almost kind of like a what's the word? Like a redeeming moment, like how we talked before about how like there was Solomon's wisdom, and then there was which king was it during the siege of Assyria, where like there was the women and children.
I don't know.
It was the thing we talked about, like where he talked. It was the woman who was like, oh, we were gonna like we ate my kid.
Yeah, I just don't remember.
Oh, okay. It was kind of like, it was meant to be like a moment where it was like comparing like
Yeah.
the old like wisdom of Solomon versus like how things have become.
Yeah.
And it's like we have another person where it's like they're being described as being wise.
Yeah.
And it's like they're actually like making wise decisions.
Yeah.
So it's kind of redeeming a little bit
Yeah.
for Israel.
Yeah. Well, it is very redeeming, right? I mean, like, this is, like, in the light of their, like, darkest moment, and then it's like, oh, so not everybody was bad. It's like, no, Daniel's actually pretty solid, and then his friends are solid, too, and again, I think this chapter is just supposed to be a glimpse of how life was like. Like, they're obviously making decisions like this all the time, but this was, like, one that they confronted very earlier on. So he listened to them in this matter, and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, it was seen that their appearance was better, and that they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. This is why it's so funny to me. I don't know if you've ever seen this, like Barnes & Noble and stuff. There's like all these, or at Mardell, they have like these Christian books that are, it's called like the Daniel Diet. And it used to be a whole fad where it was about losing weight. And that always cracked me up. Because it's like, have you not read the story? Like, the whole point is that they got fatter because of it. Like, they're not like, I mean, and to be fair, whenever it says fatter, I think it probably means that they're more like just like nourished, right? So it's not like they're actually getting like obtuse. Sorry, this is totally random. I know we need to get through this. It's already almost 9 o'clock. But to be fair, I gave like a 40-minute introduction, so I'm gonna kind of just take some of that.
Yeah.
But have y'all heard the word obtuse used to describe fat before?
No.
I'm not sure if I've heard obtuse before.
That's wild.
I
Because
think
you have me. Thank you.
I think of geometry.
Because every time I say obtuse, like
Well, there's driving.
You think acute, and then you think obtuse.
yeah, but like okay, because I said obtuse, and
Driving
then,
the
like
car, and he's like obtuse. I'm like, what?
now every time I say somebody's like obtuse,
Like, why
like
are you
she's like
calling that?
yeah, it's like okay, just whatever. Anyways,
Yeah,
so it works out, right? By the end of the story, things are actually exactly as he said, right? Like 10 days pass. It's only a week and a half, but they look and they're like, whoa, like the Jewish guys. Like, I'm assuming it's mainly Daniel and his 3 friends. I don't think it says it's others at that point. But yeah, apparently they look and they're like, wow, it actually worked. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine that they were to drink and kept giving them seed. So the overseer's like, okay, well that's okay, cool. Like you made a good argument and it worked for you. And let me ask you this: what is the impact that this has on the overseer?
It's like something's, you may not know what it is, but he's like, something's different about these guys.
Yeah, it inherent now all of a sudden the gears are turning, right? It's like he has no human explanation for what just happened, right? It's like, wait a second, like that should not have physically happened. It has never happened because it's not like this is the first time Babylon's conquered people, right? The reason they're doing this is because it's always worked in the past. And now he's like, okay, that does not make sense. And the only explanation he has is this one youth saying, I worship the God of Israel and I want to honor him by doing this. Now all of a sudden you've got this overseer who's scratching his head and he's like, there must be something with this God of Israel, right?
Yeah.
And again, those are the little things right there to where it's not like Daniel's over here like being like, here's a gospel tract. Like, no, instead it's like how he is living is practically giving glory to God. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with giving out gospel tracts, but I am saying that a lot of people who do give out gospel tracts, I think that the hearts behind why they're doing it might actually make it wrong. Because I think sometimes it's more about them trying to visibly demonstrate their righteousness in a showboaty way. To where it's not the action itself that's bad, but it's the sometimes it's the heart behind it that makes us more in line with the Pharisees than others. But what Daniel does here is just it's cool, and God honored it, right? God did not have to, but He did, and because God, like I don't know, it says that God saw Daniel, right? Which I think is cool, just because I don't know. A lot of times nowadays we talk about us having like a personal relationship with God. But that isn't like the driving focus of Scripture. Like typically Scripture is more focused on God's relationship with His people as a whole. But chapters like this remind you, no, God does see you personally. And He recognizes like if you do something like, He is a good Father who will, He will honor your request if you're asking with a pure heart. That's why, Jesus says, anything you ask in my name, I will do it. Right? He's not saying that you have to say in Jesus' name at the end of a prayer. What He's saying is that if you ask it with like a sincere heart, according to the will of Jesus, it'll be granted. And Daniel's doing something that is 100% in alignment with God's will. And so I just think that's really cool. Which leads us to the end of the chapter, verses 17 through 21. And as for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and insight in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. All right, so
is this where you say to kind of like bookmark the story?
well, that's what I was saying on the chiastic
Yeah.
thing, where it's like you see it, like it seems repetitive, but it's advancing it more. So before they were without defect, they were wise, they were knowledgeable, but now God is giving them more. What is He giving them? Knowledge and insight, specifically into what?
Literature and learning.
Yeah, literature and wisdom, learning. So I'm assuming this is referring to the literature and the learning and the wisdom of the Babylonians. To where even amongst the Babylonians, they're like, those guys are smart, right? To where it's just, he's exalting them, right? To where it's not like they're over there like, preaching in the synagogues, but whenever people listen to them talk about anything, it's like, oh, okay. Which once again calls back to like Joseph, right? Whenever Joseph is a servant in Potiphar's house, he becomes the best servant. whenever he is a prisoner. He's the best prisoner to where they're like, hey, you want to be in charge of the prison? Which is weird. But I think that like this is like the whole principle of like excellence, right? Whenever like whatever you do it for the glory of God. That's what they're doing.
No, and
Right?
you can also, maybe the story isn't exactly the same, but maybe comparable to Solomon's wisdom. In a way.
Yeah, well, and I think Sean's kind of addressing that as well. There is like this idea of like wisdom, like knows, like the whole point of wisdom is that you know how to navigate through complicated situations, right? I think it's very often that like, especially like in churches and stuff like that, we try to make everything black and white. But if everything had a black and white answer, the book of Proverbs would not need to exist. The book of Proverbs exists because there are times where there's gray area and it's difficult to conduct yourself in wisdom, and therefore you need to have, it's like, sometimes you answer a fool according to his folly, sometimes you do not. And so it's like there are these principles that you live by, and that's why we study scripture, because we need to know God's heart and we need to know God's will, and that's how we learn to navigate things. Because how do you handle a smartphone? The Bible doesn't address that. But there are principles you can learn in the Bible that teach you how to navigate it wisely, right? And there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be challenged with on an everyday basis. But I just think that's cool to where this isn't like, I don't want you to think this is like prosperity gospel where it's like, as long as you got your eyes on God, you will be exalted in everything you do. In this particular instance, this is what he does for them. That does not, like, this is descriptive, not prescriptive, right? It's not saying that this is always how it's going to be for every single person. To where it's like, oh, well, if I'm just faithful to God, I will be the CEO of my company one day. That's not what it's saying. But it is saying that if you are faithful to God, he will reward you. That reward might not be in being elevated. I mean, think about Jeremiah. We just finished covering that. He was rewarded by being thrown into cisterns and ultimately being killed. So there's different, like, not everybody's going to have the same exact experience. But in this instance, they are living in a foreign land, and God actually elevates them to where they can be, it puts them into a position where they can actually serve the Babylonians better, but they can also serve the Jewish people better whenever the rest of the Jews come their way. And I think that's kind of cool, right? So I would also say that should encourage us, once again, study other literature, study other stuff. Be so well versed in it that you can out-argue them, right? It's like know the doctrines of Mormonism better than people who are actually Mormons, right? Like that, like to where people are like, okay, you know what? Like he knows his stuff. Wow, can't argue with that. He knows his stuff, but he's still a Christian, which means maybe there's something to that, right? Like if they're over here like quoting the Enuma Elish backwards and forwards, but they're still Jewish, it's like maybe there's something to the God of Israel, not the gods of Babylon.
Well, if you stand on the side of truth, then you shouldn't be scared to explore the other things because the truth stays the truth.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's what I always try to make sure that my YouTube algorithm is recommending me stuff that comes from people I don't agree with. It's like I want like videos from atheists and Catholics and like I don't know, just like all sorts of stuff I don't agree with. Because to me that's usually a good sign that like I'm don't live in like an echo chamber of just my own thoughts. It's like well no, like engage with this other stuff. Because you want to follow the truth. But there's this supernatural gifting behind this, right? Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams, and that's kind of a little foreshadowing for what's going to come later in the book, starting in the next chapter. Then at the end of the days, which the king had spoken of for bringing them in, so how many days is that?
10.
Not 10. How long did the king prescribe?
Oh.
3
years.
3 years, so approximately like 1,000 days.
Okay.
So at the end of those days, the commander of the officials brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Right, so they're now officially equipped to be servants of the king. And the king talked with them, and out of them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So once again, they're all called by their Hebrew names, but that's because we're also we're writing in Hebrew at this point. So they stood in service before the king. So these guys are just acknowledged like, okay, these guys are they're set apart. I did see people talking about like it's interesting how like throughout the book it's like Daniel and his 3 friends, and that's like a recurring theme like throughout scripture, to where you also have like Job and his 3 friends, and then like I forgot. There's like several instances throughout scripture where it's like one person and their 3 friends, or even like broader. There's like David and his mighty men, and like there's like I don't know. Like it's almost like these group of people is like it's supposed to like almost like represent like the people as a whole. It's like it's a small picture of like a large group of people or something. I don't know. So they stood in service before the king. And as for every matter of wisdom and understanding which the king sought from them, he found them 10 times better. Hey, there's number 10 again. One for each day. No, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in all his kingdom.
Wow. Could you imagine out serving the people who are like that are actually like under Nebuchadnezzar? Like
Yeah.
you're not even one of his people, but he's like, you're better than all my people. Like you're that good.
I don't think we should be surprised when later on in the book some of them get jealous and they're like, we need to cast this guy into a lion's den.
Yeah.
It's like imagine being 70 years
Just
old,
got
you've been
here,
serving
man.
in Babylon your
Yeah.
entire life, then some teenagers show up and just show you up.
In
And
3
they're-
years.
And the thing is, they're not even Babylonian. Like it's like
Yeah.
they show up and they're just like over here like, oh, we worship our own God, but like
yeah.
we know your stuff better than you do. It's like that's just annoying. It's like okay, whatever. It's also interesting because it says they knew it better than all the magicians and conjurers, which would seem to imply that from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, he just kind of lumped them in with the magicians and conjurers.
Yeah.
Which is, again, interesting because it doesn't seem like Daniel has a problem with that. Even though Daniel does not view himself as a magician or a conjurer, but he doesn't go out of his way to be like, oh, by the way, that's not what we were. It's almost like he's fine with them calling him, call me a different name. Call me, sure, you want to call me a magician? That's whatever. But whenever they finally ask him, hey, can you interpret this dream? He will say, well, interpretations belong to God. Right? So it's like, you can call me whatever you want, just don't call me late for dinner, Like that's like kind of his whole thing where it's like, yeah, like, if like most likely if you went to them in Babylon, they would say, oh, who is Daniel? Oh, he's a magician. Daniel would disagree with that, but he's fine with them calling him that, right? Whereas I think a lot of times us as Christians, that's where we would draw the line. We're like, no, like we draw the line from the wrong things. We would be all about eating the food because that's beneficial to us, but we would draw the lines on things that really aren't of major consequence. Which brings up stuff that we can again talk about after the Bible study. But then verse 21, this is the final verse of the chapter, and then I do want to just read through verses 1 through 4, chapter 2, but we're not going to have to cover them. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. So, spoiler alert, Daniel actually continued to serve after the first year of Cyrus the king. Because we're going to see that, because later on it'll tell us, in the third year of Cyrus the king, this happened. Why does it stop? Like why does it specifically mention until the first year of Cyrus the king, if he continued serving afterwards?
I'm thinking it's something political.
Kind of. Well, you actually alluded to it at the very beginning of the study. What did Cyrus do?
Okay, Cyrus goes in, takes out the Babylonians, and I believe it's mentioned in Nehemiah, if I'm not mistaken, right? Nehemiah and Ezra. He's like, okay, you guys can go back and rebuild your temple and serve your God.
Yes. So Cyrus is the king who came in, and he's the king of Persia. He's the one who allowed the Jewish people to return from Babylon. Do you know what year of his reign he did that? First year.
First.
Yeah, in the first year of King Cyrus, he said, go back home. Daniel's not going to go back home. He's going to stay in Babylon. But the reason why it mentions this year is because that means that the beginning and the end of the chapter, it bookends the whole exile, right? Daniel was there in the first year of the exile, right? Whenever the third year of Jehoiakim, they were taken captive. Daniel was in that group, and he was there all the way until the end, whenever people went home. So this whole like I said, the chapter is just a big introduction. It's just saying Daniel was there the entire exile, and ultimately when they go back, he still stays there. I mean, there were later Jews who would come back in 440 BC, which is 70 years after that and stuff. But the whole point is that Daniel's ministry spanned the entire exile, and that's why I say that this chapter is in many ways supposed to be a glimpse of what life in exile was like. Right? Like, these are the decisions that the Jews were being confronted with every single day. It's like, where do we draw the line? How much can we compromise without compromising our faith? Right? And so, this basically just sets up the rest of the book, because there's going to be some places where they're put in where it could literally come at the cost of their life. And they have to say, can I compromise here? And sometimes you can't. Right? Sometimes it's like, okay, I can't bow down before that statue. I cannot pray to a king, right? And so in those instances, it can cost you your life. But in this instance, it wasn't even really that big of a deal, right? But the whole point is, like, in many ways, the book of Daniel is trying to figure out what are the right hills to die on. And I would say that is also the challenge facing us on an everyday basis. It is very easy for us where we are tempted to make every hill a hill to die on, and that's not scriptural wisdom, right? Even within the church, right? I mean, even within the church, we love to just like make everything a hill to die on. It's like, well, us Baptists do it this way, and that's the only way to do it, and if you aren't doing it this way, you're probably going to hell. Like, that's just wrong, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, there are certain things that are hills to die on, right? And we've got to figure out, okay, like, where's that line, right? And that's like in the church, right? Okay, like the Trinity, can we sacrifice that? Probably not, right? Jesus being God, probably can't sacrifice that either. But those are all just doctrinal stuff. What about when it comes to how to love people? Right? Like, where can we draw the line, and where can we like leave for some wiggle room, and like where can we leave things to be a matter of conscience, and where is it a matter of like, no, Scripture says this, and it's not up for interpretation, right? Like, we have to figure that out within the church, and then it gets even more complicated when you account for the world around us, right? I mean, I think about it. I'm not trying to like open up this can of worms. I'm just listing out examples. Like a big thing that people are trying to figure out nowadays. I mean, we've been trying to figure it out, but it's become a really hot topic the last few like months. But just like the relationship between religion and politics, right? Is it my job to enforce my religious beliefs on people politically, or is it my job to like, or are we supposed to have like no approach, like just total hands-off approach and not be involved at all? I would say it's probably neither of those. It's probably somewhere in the middle, but that requires wisdom. Because you got to figure out, okay, which things do I fight for, which things do I not? And those are not easy questions to answer, but those are questions that the book of Daniel is forcing us to wrestle.
We can go into it later, but I would argue there are some pretty obvious ones. But
There probably are. But my whole point is that that's just that's one example. But then outside the realm of politics, everyday interactions with people, right? You could easily turn everything into a hill to die on. And there's also many ways where you can just easily concede. And the easier thing to do is just conform to the culture around us, right? And if you are not constantly bringing your devotion to Christ to the forefront of your mind every single moment of every single day, you will conform without even realizing it. Because you won't realize that you're conforming. You're just going to be like, this is what everybody does. And you won't even realize, oh, wow. Like the example I was talking about, like with my students reading The Summer I Turned Pretty. They didn't even realize that the books they were reading were shaping how their minds like viewed love and romance, because they hadn't educated themselves in what Scripture says. To them, it's like, oh no, this is what it looks like. And whenever I read this book, when I watch Hallmark, and whenever I watch rom-coms and stuff, like it's all the same thing. So that just must be what love is like. And if you're not realizing, oh, Scripture says something vastly different, you don't even realize that you're conforming, right? You think, oh no, this is what it is, when it's like, oh no, Scripture says something totally different. But then it's like, okay, but where's the hill to die on there, right? Do I want to make every single thing, like, should I just like make like 5-hour-long YouTube videos just like criticizing every single thing in a Hallmark movie? Probably not, right? But the thing is, you have to figure out where to draw the line. And so this chapter is it's an introduction to that, right? This was, like, Daniel was there from the beginning to the end, and every single day he was confronted with decisions like this, right? Where do I draw the line? Sure, I can read different books, I can speak a different language, you can call me a different name, you can give me whatever job title you want, but I'm not going to eat that food. I got to draw the line there. Which is weird, because you wouldn't even expect that to be the line, right? It's like, to us, we're like, just eat the food, dude. It's not that big of a deal. But to him, he's like, no, that is a big deal. Because, to me, it would defile me. Because it would be, like, I would be allowing the king to sustain me rather than the king in heaven, right? It's like, I don't want my body to be sustained by the food that is given to me by the king of Babylon. Instead, I want my body to be sustained by the God in heaven. So I will deprive myself this royal food, and I will just eat grain, and I will let God prove his faithfulness. Like it's like, okay, cool. But that's where we have to, every single day, we have to figure out where to draw the line. That being said, do y'all have anything else y'all want to add? Also, buckle up, because the next few chapters are much longer. So we're just going to go for like 5 hours. Anyways, we don't have to break this down, but it's gonna really bother me if we don't at least read it, just because, like I said, verse 1, 2, 3, and the first half of verse 4 of chapter 2 are also in Hebrew before it goes Aramaic for the next several chapters, and so I feel like we just have to kind of like at least address it all together, or else it would just annoy me. Sean, could you just read verses 1 through 4 there?
Yeah. Now in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king said to call in the magicians, the conjurers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. Then the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know this dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. O king, live forever. Say the dream to your servants, and we will declare with the interpretation.
Ooh, what a cliffhanger. We'll cover the actual dream next week. One thing I just want to say about it, I love the transition here. Like, this is such a seamless transition from a literary perspective, because the way that he transitions from Hebrew to Aramaic is by literally just having a person speak in Aramaic. And then the rest of the story is in Aramaic. Like, I just love that. It's like, I was talking with Sean earlier, it's almost like if I was just to be like, Buenos dias, ¿cómo estás? And then I just started telling a story in Spanish afterwards. It's like, it's such a weird transition. It's like, hey, how do I want to shift from Hebrew to Aramaic? Well, let's just have a random guy speak in that language and then just keep it going. It's like, this, I just love how weird that is. And I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, if y'all have nothing to add, we can close up in prayer. Sorry for going a little bit over, but
How dare you?
yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm not sorry. Like, I am not apologizing. This is my house. I will go for 4 hours if I want. If y'all want to leave early, y'all can get out. Y'all have anything y'all want to add?
I don't think so.
I'm good.
All right. Yeah. Oh, what do y'all want to close this out in prayer?
Lord, I thank you so much for allowing us to gather together and to go over your word. Lord, I pray that you would allow us to just think about the scripture that we read today as we go throughout our everyday lives for the next week. And Lord, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to be able to apply ourselves in the same ways and similar ways that Daniel did in this story, Lord, so that we can better show your character to the people around us and the love of Christ to people around us. Lord, we thank you for all you are and all that you do. In your name we pray.
Amen.